Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host, Deffinition, and this is the channel where they all float. With Pennywise now out of its 27-year hibernation and now making its way across cinemas worldwide, it's time to dive into its latest movie and break down everything that you need to know about it. Throughout this video, I'll be going over the main plot points of the showdown between the Killer Clown and the Losers Club and discussing my interpretation of the movie and its ending. There will be heavy spoilers here, so if you haven't had a chance to check out the film yet, then I highly recommend that you turn off now. With that out of the way, I just want to give a huge thank you for clicking this video. Now let's get into my breakdown of It Chapter 2. After the horrifying death of Adrian Mellon and a number of disappearances in the town of Derry, it becomes clear that Pennywise has returned to the surface once more. Mike, who has remained in the city, observing any strange occurrences that happen there, calls on his old friends from the Losers Club to remember their oaths and pleads with them to return to the town to stop the creature once and for all. Each of them, other than Mike, has went on to have successful careers, but this phone call that they receive makes them slowly begin to remember their childhoods and also the terror that awaits them. Some simply cannot handle it, and Stan commits suicide out of fear, which we later discover is because that he feels that this would have held them back in their final fight. I'll discuss this more later down the line, but I have to say it is a very interesting new take on the character. Beverly is once more in a toxic relationship and, similar to her childhood, is dealt abuse by her husband Tom Rogan, who, contrary to the source material and miniseries, is in the film very little. Bill, who was always a metaphor for Stephen King, is a married writer who has trouble finishing stories. This is kind of an interesting allegory for the book itself and how it finishes, and the movie actually takes a huge creative liberty at the end and changes it up quite a lot from the source material. Juxtaposing the original miniseries, Bill's wife, similar to Tom Rogan, is absent for a lot of the movie. In the series, she was captured by Tom and then taken to Pennywise, where she was sent into a vegetative state, but this is completely missing, which I personally think is a smart move, as that was a pretty lackluster part of the adaptation and original work. Ben is a successful architect, however he also suffers from alcoholism and still possesses unrequited love for Beverly, which is also a driving force for him returning to the town. Eddie is still a hypochondriac and has pretty much went on to marry his mother, literally, and similar to Beverly, he finds himself trapped in a cycle of unhappiness. The biggest change up comes in the form of Richie, who, like the source material, is a famous comedian that enjoys national acclaim, but the movie changes him drastically in the fact that he's actually gay and is in love with Eddie. This sort of mirrors Ben's affection for Beverly, and whilst it may sound slightly jarring to people who weren't expecting such a turn, I actually think that the movie pulls it off really well, especially due to Hader's performance. Eddie in the miniseries always struck me as gay, and they did change up his adult life slightly to make it so that he was a virgin, and I think this relationship and attraction makes a lot of sense and sort of fleshes out Richie more than we've ever had before, as in the past he was pretty much a one-note character that was used predominantly for comic relief a lot of the time. Anyway, they reunite in the city minus Stan and discover that not only are things far worse than when they were children, but that Pennywise is also out for them as adults. He's far more vicious than he was 27 years prior, and from the off it's clear that this is a completely different beast altogether. There's far more gore and the movie feels a lot more mature than the prior entry. Now, those expecting to see a film full of Pennywise will be very disappointed, I think, as the character, or rather the form, isn't in the film that much. Whilst it itself does pop up often, there's not really much of the clown, which I was hoping to see more of, as Bill Skarsgård is spellbinding in the scenes that he gets. The Losers Club begin to recount their childhood, and throughout Pennywise torments them as he continues his reign of terror, showing just how helpless they are against him. It's terrifying, and it's a huge step up from the prior film that shows why they must stop the cycle. There's a huge scene in which we revisit the Losers Club back when they were younger, and I've noticed a lot online that there's a criticism about the de-aging effect, which I agree comes across pretty poorly. I don't know why the creative team decided to try and do this, as it falls completely flat and massively took me out of the film. Whilst the child actors have grown up, I don't think that it would have been as bad to see the actors as they are carrying out this dialogue minus the effects. Marvel really set the bar high with their de-aging, and unfortunately this massively pales in comparison, seeming almost laughable at points. Whilst it's not enough to break the film, it is quite head scratching and will probably be a big critique against the film going forward. Now, not long after this we discover Pennywise's origin story, and the group uncover the way to defeat him, which is known as the Ritual of Chud, a metaphysical movement that will destroy the creature on a psychic level and finally vanquish him. The group look for totems from their childhood that will help to empower them so that they can finally face down against the creature. However, this turns out to be one big bait and switch, which I'll get into later. Henry Bowers returns, and whilst he is slightly underdeveloped, he still acts as another hurdle between the Losers Club and their final showdown. After he dies, they return to Neobold House, and Pennywise uses all of the elements from their childhoods to try and make them remember the fear that has haunted them for so long. It's an awesome scene that by far bests the original movie and acts as a trip down memory lane. It even switches up the Stanley head in the refrigerator scene and uses him as a child rather than an adult. There's an awesome Thing reference that I think many fans of horror will love, but finally the group make it to Pennywise's lair. Here they're given a real test, and it looks like fear is slowly overcoming them as they begin to deal with the enormity of their task. They head into the lair, and there's even a reference to the turtle from the book as they go into the final showdown. The Ritual of Chud fails and does nothing to Pennywise, and Mike reveals that it didn't actually work initially, but he believed that due to their self-belief they may have been able to overcome it. Pennywise, using its psychic abilities, transforms reality around them whilst changing into the spider creature that massively breaks them down mentally, reminding them of all the trauma that they've been through, most notably Beverly, which is when the most blood on screen in a scene moment happens. However, with the love that exists between the characters, they are able to get each other out of it. Ben saves Beverly and vice versa, Richie's belief in Eddie strengthens him, Bill apologises to a vision of Georgie, in which he admits that he lied about being sick as a child and that he just didn't want to play with him that day. It's a really heartbreaking moment that completely recontextualizes the film, and in my opinion is one of the best reveals in the movie. Bill sheds the guilt, and along with the rest of the group at this moment, they break out of the spell. They fight the creature head on, and in this scene we also get another big death from the book. Eddie, attempting to save Richie, tries to spear Pennywise, but unfortunately he is impaled by the creature, which eventually leads to the character's death. This inspires the group to no longer fear Pennywise, and as it's no longer able to thrive on fear, it shrinks to a point that the losers are able to finally kill the character by ripping out its heart. In the finale, though the Losers Club win, it's a very bittersweet ending. We see Richie carving R+E in the same way that people often do with a teenage crush, which shows that he's really lost the love of his life. It's a tragic reveal that really hits home and cements that we all have regrets in life that we wish we had the time to go back and change. We learn of Stan's true intentions through a letter in which he reveals that if he had have came back to Derry, that Pennywise would have become stronger due to the fear that he had for it, and this would have probably meant that they would have lost. It's a nice little twist on the original work, I think, as Stan's death always felt a bit kind of underdeveloped to me and lacking in purpose, whereas this really drives home that it wasn't in vain, and in the end that he did do it for the right reasons rather than purely because he was a coward. People who commit suicides often express feelings of being a burden upon others, and this adds a lot of weight to the thinking behind why Stan made the choice that he did. Ben and Beverly start a relationship together, and Bill and Mike discuss Stan's letter, and Mike finally states that once and for all he's going to leave Derry. Mike has pretty much been told throughout his entire life that he'll never be successful, and this mentality is the main thing that's always held him back and has been the reason that he stayed behind in Derry. Now the character finally feels like he can let go and start a new life, and it's inspiring to see him grow. In the end, though it's a complete change from the original book and miniseries, I think this works a lot better and it ends the film on an emotional high. But what did I think of the movie overall? Well, whilst I did enjoy it, I do feel like it was impeded slightly by the length, which at some points can seem meandering. There's also an issue with the lack of Pennywise, which is one of the main things that people come to see this film for. I think when reading the book and even watching the miniseries, the strongest element for me was always the children's story. This was easy to relate to, and who doesn't remember growing up being scared of things that now seem laughable? I remember when I was about 4, I got told by a group of teens that there lived a troll on a reservoir next to where we lived, and for many years I was too terrified to even go up there. Now this seems laughable these days, but stuff like that made me really find commonality with the story of It Chapter 1, and I think like many, the adult section section just didn't appeal as much, which is why myself and other critics are having difficulty praising the film. I mean, that was a part of a book that pretty much went on to inspire the entirety of Stranger Things, and there's just so much good in there that it completely overshadows their lives as adults. Now, there is rumoured to be a director's cut that clocks in at 4 hours, in which I think that elements such as Henry Bauer's storyline will be explored in more detail, perhaps making for a more enjoyable film even if longer in length. That's not to say it's bad though, and It Chapter 2 deals with a lot of its subjects in a mature and adult manner that do still make one of the most interesting horror movies of the last decade or so. It to me has always been a metaphor for sexual assault, and whilst many may not agree, I think that there's a lot of evidence to support this. We follow characters who went through traumatic experiences when they were younger, with an adult-like figure who seemed untouchable by the law and was something that wasn't discussed openly. Pennywise is almost an open secret in the town, though no one ever really brings it up. These characters repress their memories only to confront them years later and finally put an end to what happened to them as youngsters. Pennywise himself even evokes images of the infamous serial killer John Wayne Gacy, who famously dressed up as a clown, and while Stephen King has never acknowledged that the story is inspired by him, the fact that Gacy was arrested during 1978 when King began writing the book is hard to ignore. Either way, this cements to me that when dealing with such storylines that a sense of maturity has to come with the work, and It Chapter 2 definitely carries that without it feeling heavy-handed or off-putting for people who just want to watch a simple horror film with a few jump scares. The acting of the piece is phenomenal, most notably Bill Hader, who took Richie from one of my least favourite out of the group to the best by far. He was always annoying in the past to me, but Bill embodies him with an outstanding performance that adds far more gravitas to the character than we've ever seen before. Overall, It Chapter 2 is an enjoyable ride, albeit a slightly disappointing one from what I was expecting, and whilst it has a lot of highs and does develop the source material in an interesting way, I think it still pales slightly when compared to Chapter 1, and that's why it gets a 7.5 out of 10. Obviously, I'd love to hear your thoughts on It Chapter 2 and if you agree with me or not. Comment below and let me know, and if you enjoyed this video then please like it and make sure you check out my full plot leak of Joker, which will be linked at the end. I got over everything you need to know about the movie, so it's definitely worth checking out if you want to know more. If you want to come talk to me about movies, TV shows, games and comic books, then you can follow me on Twitter at DeffinitionYT. It's the best way to get in touch with me and it's the perfect place to suggest new videos and content, so hopefully I'll see you over there after this. Also, just want to let you know that we're giving away a free copy of John Wick 3 on Blu-ray, and all you have to do to be in with a chance of winning is to like this video, make sure that you subscribe to the channel, and leave your thoughts on It Chapter 2 in the comment section below. The winner will be chosen at random on September the 10th, and the Blu-ray will be shipped out from then to whoever gets the prize, so best of luck to everyone who takes part. This is a channel for people who are mad into movies, so if that's the kind of thing you like, hit subscribe. Thanks again for taking the time to watch this. I've been Deffinition, you've been the best, and I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.